Stan Breakell may have been thinking green before green was cool. The chairman of the board for Breakell Incorporated, a general contracting company in Roanoke, Stan Breakell joined the firm after graduating from the University of Virginia in 1975 with a mechanical engineering degree. 3 decades plus later, Breakell, his brother James, the president of Breakell Inc., and others there are exploring construction management techniques with an eye towards sustainable building practices. Breakell serves on the Roanoke Valley Cool Cities Board, the Roanoke Library Board, and on the board for the Western Virginia Land Trust. He's received an award for conservation from the Garden Club of Virginia and was named Roanoke City's Citizen of the Year for 2009. Even the company cars driven by Breakell employees are carbon-friendly, hybrids, and an experimental battery-powered car that Stan Breakell likes to show off. Stan Breakell, welcome to the interview.
Gene, thanks for having me.
Before we get started, I wanted to ask you about being named Roanoke City's Citizen of the Year for 2009. Talk about that. I guess they kind of sprung it on you with your employees present.
They really did. It was a total surprise to me, and in fact, Sheila Umberger of the library system helped set me up. She said that the library was going to receive some kind of award because I hadn't really planned on going, and so
You're on the library board.
I'm the president of the library advisory board. And so, if I go to stuff and the library's involved, and by golly, they got me good.
Yeah? You'll have to get her back, huh?
I will certainly try to.
Since you mentioned the library, are you excited about plans for the future for the city library system? I know they announced plans for a super branch, I think, on Peters Creek Road.
Right. That is really super good news, and I'm sorry to see with the current economy that they may have had to slow that process down, but I guess that's understandable. But that's an area that needs more service, and it's a great opportunity to put into action the results of the study we did some years ago. So we're thrilled about it.
Talk about Breakell Incorporated. Your father actually started the firm, correct?
Right. It was started by my father and his partner William Watts, and they started out as house builders, subdivisions, and Round Hill subdivision, for instance, was a subdivision they did. And I think they got tired of residential picking paint colors and things of that sort and moved into commercial, and so we sort of picked up the ball and went from there, and now we are strictly commercial industrial type builders.
And it's sort of a family affair. Your brother James is president.
James is now has been in the business for over 10 years, and right, it is sort of a family affair, and I guess we could say it's even more of a family affair because we are a majority-owned ESOP corporation, and so
the employees have a stake in the company.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How what can you tell me in this economy? How has Breakell been doing? How is, in general, what's the climate here in this area for building projects?
Well, I think that it has generally been a little bit harder for commercial industrial builders, but Breakell has been very fortunate in the past year, and as we look forward, and not been terribly affected by the downturn in the economy. And some of that's luck, and I'd like to think some of this has to do with sustainable design and construction and those kinds of things. But we're optimistic going forward. I think the technological opportunities are vast, and we say bring it on.
Let's talk about that. President Obama and other people have talked about green technologies, and that's really one of the things that's going to help us get back on track economic-wise, manufacturing-wise, and all that. It seems like 30 years ago, Stan, that President Carter was talking about solar panels, and he put one on the roof of the White House at one point. What happened to the green movement and that whole thing? It seemed like we kind of put it on the shelf for a while. Was that because energy remained cheap, or what was the deal?
Well, I think it's a great question because it's probably driven by the cost of gasoline, even though nobody generates electricity from gasoline, or hardly anybody from, petroleum, if you will. But I think that perception back in the early 80s or late 70s, I mean, I put solar collectors on the roof of my house way back then.
People probably thought you were a nut, huh?
Well, kind of, but it made sense then, and then when the cost of gasoline went way down, it sort of fell from the forefront of the newspapers. People got back into their same old ways. It's all about the cost of energy, and I think here it comes again, and maybe it's here to stay. In fact, I'm pretty darn sure it's here to stay.
And I know I've heard you remark that shortly after you got out of school from UVA, went to work, you were a mechanical engineer, that you were already in that mode, sort of thinking ahead, thinking green. are you glad to kind of see that people maybe are catching up, you know, with the thinking that this is a good way to go?
Yeah, I think it's really good. And I'll tell you how I first kind of became aware of I guess, man's impact on the environment. So I'm a scuba diver and did a lot of this in the Florida Keys, and I could see over years the coral growth being stunted by warmer water temperatures, nuclear power discharge, and just maybe impacts of over diving and whatnot. And that kind of got stuck in the back of my head, and then years later, you know, here it comes. You talk about the coral reefs being the canary in the coal mine with regard to warmer ocean temperatures and global warming. But interestingly enough, global warming notwithstanding, it's about the dollars now. It really is.
That's why I wanted to ask you, even if you're a global warming skeptic, what's the rationale for thinking greener, for thinking sustainable building practices, you know, and thinking on that track? Is there a good, you know, argument to be made that that's a better way to go, even if you don't necessarily buy into global warming?
Well, I give a presentation that's called the business case for green to, you know, engineering groups and owners and things like that. And if you just take a very rigorous economic model approach to it and look at the return on investment, the numbers make sense. And I think you can ignore global warming if you want and just talk about what does a prudent businessman do to perhaps hedge against future increases or in utilities, or just, you know, protecting the value of his company or stockholders, et cetera.
And one thing that Breakell Incorporated has been in on is projects like the State and City building in Roanoke, which is a 100-year-old building, and the former Blacksburg Motor Company building, now used by the town of Blacksburg, adapting older structures. I know that's something that you're very interested in, and that there is a case to be made that you can adapt older structures and either make them LEED certified or more environmentally friendly.
Right, and the important component here is that those older structures are historic tax credit projects, and the state and federal government will incentivize a developer significantly, maybe to as much as 40 cents on the dollar, in tax credits that can be sold for cash. So if you can do that with a tax credit project and put the perhaps more expensive technologies in that building, you can get those technologies at a discount. And if you think about it, particularly in a LEED sort of environment, a recycled building is the very best thing that you can do. It's far better than going out, you know, another mile into the suburbs and taking a farmer's field and building a building. You can stay in an urban center, if you will. You've reduced transportation costs, you got a walkable situation, and you've reused a building. Doesn't have to be torn down.
Like the State and City building downtown
Like
Roanoke.
the State and City building, like the Blacksburg Motor building. So you see a lot of projects like this, blending historic tax credits and LEED design. And it's tricky because you can't just tear the windows out of a historic building.
Right.
And, you know, it's got to stay in character. And so that's a challenge, but worth doing.
Our guest today is Stan Breakell from Breakell Incorporated. I'm Gene Marrano. This is The Interview. We'll be right back.